Me too.
Welcome to our midterm elections forum. I'm Alec Lamis with the Political Science Department here at Case, and we have a great panel, probably the two most knowledgeable people anywhere around here and probably in the United States. So we've got Jerry Austin and Mark Weaver. And I'm going to introduce Mr. Austin first, and then when it comes time for you to speak, I'm going to then introduce Mr. Weaver. And they're going to talk for whatever they'd like, 25 or so minutes, and then we'll maybe leave about 30 minutes for questions. Gerald Austin is one of America's most experienced and most successful strategists and advisors, having operated his own marketing and political consulting firm for more than 30 years. In 1988, Mr. Austin was Jesse Jackson's national campaign manager, and in 1992 he served as senior political advisor to Senator Paul Tsongas's campaign for president. His other clients have included President Jimmy Carter, Senator Gary Hart, Senator Carol Moseley Braun, Senator Paul Wellstone, Senator Sherrod Brown, Senator John Glenn, Governor Richard Celeste, and numerous members of Congress. So you can see he's operated at high levels in Democratic politics. Mr. Austin was a member of the international delegation who witnessed the Marcos Aquino election in the Philippines, the Pinochet plebiscite in Chile, and was an advisor to the SDLP in Northern Ireland when they beat Gerry Adams for the MP seat in Belfast. I remember that election, even though I completely understand the politics of it. In 2006, he helped the Hungarian Socialist Party retain enough seats in the parliament to remain in power in Hungary. He's had a number of corporate clients, including the American Automobile Manufacturers Association, American Electric Power, and others. He's had a number of governmental clients, the Greater Cleveland Growth Association, the president of the Cook County Board of Commissioners, the Cleveland School Board, and many others. He's a native of New York City. Delighted to have you.
Thank you.
Stand over here. Basically, tonight I want to talk about three different political topics that are hot and heavy right now, and that is the national scene, the state scene, and even those of you here in Cuyahoga County, the Cuyahoga County scene. And the theme of what I'm going to be talking about is really based on two political scientists who very rarely are quoted. One's name is Frank Sinatra, and the other's name is Dusty Springfield. Now, Frank Sinatra, because Frank Sinatra coined the phrase riding high in April and shot down in May, and Dusty Springfield coined the phrase which is called a wishin' and a hopin'. So let me get to Frank Sinatra first. Riding high in April and shot down in May. Well, let me rephrase it. Riding high in November 2008 and shot down, pick a month, 2009 or 2010, which basically describes where we're at in terms of the national election. I was an early Obama supporter. I saw in him someone that I was waiting for a long time, which was someone to get the kids involved in politics. And people have tried, but they needed a Pied Piper, and he was the Pied Piper. He was closer in their age than anybody else in the race. The kids in 2008 were less racist, sexist, homophobic, and as a matter of fact, partisan. They wanted their country shaken up, and they wanted somebody young enough and charismatic enough to get behind, and as luck would have it, he entered the race against Hillary Clinton, who was supposed to win, and obviously didn't. And I won't dwell on that election, but it set the stage for a lot of hope and a lot of expectations from this young, charismatic president who had never been a mayor, never been a governor, basically never run anything, becoming president of the United States. And we have a history in this country of, well, he was the first senator we elected president since JFK, so that was 40 years. He was fortunate enough to have a very important ingredient on your side in politics, and I know that all of you teach political science, talk about this a lot in your classes, and that ingredient is called luck. There's good luck and there's bad luck, and he had nothing but good luck. He got Hillary Clinton. He had to knock off sort of the big bad wolf. He knocked her off in Iowa, which he had to win initially, and then he got John McCain, the oldest candidate that was running at the time, and John McCain luckily picked Sarah Palin, which made it even better. But then all of a sudden, he puts down his hand being sworn in, and all the problems of the United States are now his. And he makes a fatal mistake. And unfortunately, it's a mistake that Democrats make all the time. Republicans don't make this mistake. Democrats make it all the time. I don't know why. And that is Politics 101, when I teach it, basically says that when you become an office holder after especially 8 years of a previous party running office, that you basically continue running against that former incumbent as if they were still on the ballot. Evidence, Ronald Reagan ran against Jimmy Carter 2 years after he beat him. And what you're supposed to do is when your cabinet members are appointed, about a month or two into their service, they have a press conference, not all at the same time, but sporadically. And they are supposed to say, here's what I found when I got in office. I found $860,000 of bills not paid. I found this, I found that. And that day forward, now you take over and you're in charge. Didn't do any of that. And Democrats don't do that. Dick Celeste, who I worked for, became a governor after 8 years of Jim Rhodes, didn't do it. Ted Strickland didn't do it. I don't know why. They don't do it. But more importantly than that, is that Obama decided he was going to be the great conciliator, that he wanted to bring everybody to the table, and we're going to do, we're going to go forward in terms of working together because people elected him and they wanted to change. They wanted to change in partisanship and all that. Well, it didn't happen. It still hasn't happened. That the Republicans have as their main agenda beating Barack Obama. Now, I don't personally think it's a racial thing. I think he's a Democrat, and they're Republicans. They want to beat him. And he also had the misfortune of having the House and Senate of the same party. So you got a president, and House and Senate of the same party. Great expectations of him. But he didn't want to beat up George Bush anymore. He didn't want to deal with basically telling folks exactly what he found when he got in there. He decided that he was going to make this partisan, and he made another fatal mistake. He made the prime priority health care. And that's great. He campaigned on health care. We should have universal health care. But when you have a country in economic straits that we're in and continue to be in, it seems to me that jobs is the first thing that should be on the agenda. Yes, he had to do the Wall Street bailouts, and he had to do GM and all that type of stuff, but it still was about jobs. And all he needed to say, what he should have said, is that we don't have a problem in this country on our people having a work ethic. We have a problem that our people don't have jobs. And we have to provide for jobs, and that because of the private sector has an inability to do that now because of what's going on Wall Street and the economy, the government has to step in and provide those jobs. Well, that didn't happen. So he goes through his first 20 months, and he finds out that all of us here could have told him that as soon as you put your hand down, all the problems of this country were yours. They don't want to hear about that it took 8 years to get to that point, and that you've only been in office for 20 months. They want to know, what are you doing? Where's the progress? Show me something that's been done. And that's very difficult to do, and he hasn't been able to do that well at all. And so now we're heading into an election where Barack Obama is the running mate of every single Democrat running for office, especially those running for re-election as governor. Now, you know that in this state, John Kasich is running against Ted Strickland. John Kasich picked as his running mate the Auditor of State, Mary Taylor. Barack Obama already had a running mate. One Lee Fisher. It's not Yvette Brown McGee or Yvette McGee Brown. I don't know which one it is. I'm sorry. His running mate's Barack Obama. That's his running mate. And even though Barack Obama's not on the ballot, he's on the ballot. And we're in a situation right now where I believe, I mean, I won't say I predict because I hope I'm not right, that we're going to see a 2010 off year midterm election that will make 1994 look like a Democratic landslide. This is going to be the worst election in recent memory for Democrats. And I don't see anything that's going to happen between now and November to turn it around. On the statewide level, Ted Strickland, as you know, is a former congressman. The last time we elected a congressman governor, I think it was 100 years ago, maybe more, a long time ago. I mean, if you can name somebody who was a congressman, in the last 50 years that became governor, I don't know who that is.
In Ohio, you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Pennsylvania, Tom Ridge went for
Yeah.
Congress, but not in Ohio.
not in Ohio. And so we elected Ted Strickland, and he beat that really tough opponent, that great campaigner, Ken Blackwell, which anybody here could have beaten Ken Blackwell in 2006. 16 years of Republican rule in the governor's office, controlling both houses of the State House, and a scandal based upon a guy named Tom Noe. And so Ted Strickland comes to office, and the Democrats are excited. We have a governor for the first time in 16 years, and he has sort of a honeymoon for the first 2 years, and then all hell breaks loose. A budget deficit that nobody really knows how much it is. Remember, he was a congressman, and in Congress, the way you balance a budget is you print more money. In Ohio, you have to balance a budget by balancing a budget. And so he proceeds to run an administration that gets involved in the 2008 presidential election by backing Hillary Clinton, spending a lot of time running around the country for Hillary Clinton. She doesn't win, but I don't think that hurts him with Barack Obama. But when Barack Obama becomes president, all of a sudden, all the problems of the economic problems of the country and the state are now Ted Strickland's problem on the state level, like they're Barack Obama's on the national level. And he needs a lot of help nationally, but he's not getting it here locally. We've lost over almost 400,000 jobs since Ted Strickland's been governor. Is it his fault? No. But if you add to the fact that when he campaigned in 2006 and said, I'm going to create 300,000 new jobs, he's about 700,000 jobs light. And when you run for re-election, people like me and people like Mark will remind you of what you said the last time you ran and what's happened in the interim. Has Ted Strickland done some good things and things he's proud of? Yes. I defy anybody here to tell me what they are if you've watched TV spots, because what he did was he made a decision based upon some early polling that suggested that the populace did not know enough about John Kasich. Well, why would they? John Kasich was a congressman, ran in Columbus, Ohio. He had a little national persona, but that was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it was, the last time he ran for president in 2000. So nobody knew who he was. Okay. So we're going to define John Kasich before he can define himself. Okay? You think maybe you tell us something about why we should re-elect you? You think you do a spot about at the same time about why we should re-elect you? I mean, you won with 60% of the vote last time, so therefore people voted for you overwhelmingly. Why don't you tell those people who voted for you why they should re-elect you? Up until maybe this week, there has not been a TV spot that's positive about Ted Strickland. And one wonders then, why would John Kasich go from maybe a 2 or 3 point or 4 point lead now to 16, 17, 18, whatever the latest polls are? Because John Kasich is on TV. He seems reasonable. He seems like a fighter. I think people like him. And he's given them a reason to vote for him because he ain't the other guy. And that's a real problem. Now, to show you how you can tell that campaigns are in trouble, Mark, I don't know if you saw this, but today the Ohio Democratic Party put out a release that said their internal polling showed that Strickland was only behind, I think, 2 points. Well, you know, the only time you ever do that is when you're behind by double digits. Campaigns don't release numbers on their own campaigns if they're doing well. A poll is an internal document which you use for planning purposes, not to be able to share with the public unless you want to basically say, wait a second, these polls are all wrong, that, you know, that I'm really surging here or whatever. On the Senate side, we have Lee Fisher against Rob Portman. And that race, I believe, was lost in January of 2009 when Lee Fisher went to the governor and said, George Voinovich is not running again. I want to run for the Senate. And Ted Strickland did not say to Lee Fisher, you're not running for anything. You're running for re-election with me. We were a team. We got elected together. You're not running for the Senate. And then the next person in the room was Jennifer Brunner. I'd like to run for the Senate. You're not running for the Senate either. You're part of my team. You're the Secretary of State's important position of apportionment. You're running for re-election. And if he would have said that to both of them, they wouldn't have been running. Now, I don't know who the Democratic nominee would have been. And I'm not suggesting that if whoever that was would be beating Rob Portman now. But that was a lack of leadership on this governor's part in basically, you know, keeping his troops together. Instead, we had a Democratic primary in which Lee Fisher far outspent Jennifer Brunner and beat her, as was predicted, spent most of his money, and Rob Portman, you know, comes on the scene. Again, TV spots, good-looking guy, you know, has something to say. If you don't know him, very attractive. Lee Fisher's not on TV. Just went on TV recently with a negative spot. All these things are not good for Democrats. Now, if, you know, I hope, you know, if anybody's looking for me to give you some, like, you know, wait a second, there's only, you know, 30-something days left to election, and here's what to look for. Sorry, I don't have it. Because what I'm always astounded by is that for some incredible reason, people who get elected to office think that 4 years later, they're going to win an election in 1 month that they lost in 3 years and 10 months. That folks like Mark and I are brilliant geniuses that can turn around, you know, make things up about somebody's record, and everything is wonderful. The fact of the matter is that in this state, in particular, which is a microcosm of the country, and in this country, there are 3 issues: jobs, jobs, and jobs. And you want to throw an economy with it, fine. It isn't health care. It isn't the war in Afghanistan, unfortunately. That's what the issue is. And people now who voted for Obama are, to use a devastating word, disappointed. Young people, for the most part, are staying with him, although they've left too. But the Republican suburban person who was tired of George Bush and tired of a lot of the crap that was going on, who may have voted for Obama and probably did to some extent, they're going back to where they feel comfortable. And this business of politics is a cyclical business. That's why I said about riding high in April and shot down in May. Democrats, you know, are probably going to have a disaster on November 2nd. They could lose the House. They could lose the Senate. They can lose, you know, a number of governorships. But as sure as I'm standing here, it'll come back because nobody knows how to run this country. I mean, nobody does, you know, because the people that probably do know how to run it, they're not running for president. You know, we don't want to get a business leader, you know, who run a major corporation. I'm going to tell you one anecdote here, which I talked to Professor Lamis about at dinner tonight. And it sort of indicates or supports what I just said. I ran Jesse Jackson's campaign for president in 1988. I didn't run that campaign because I thought he'd be president of the United States, God forbid. I ran the campaign because I thought Jesse would involve people in in the process in politics who wouldn't normally be involved. Well, the end of the campaign is over. The last primary is about to be held in June in California. He's not going to be the nominee. When I told him that he ought to get out of the race and support Dukakis, he told me that the campaign may be over, but the crusade continues. And I told him that I wasn't Crusader Rabbit. I signed on to be campaign manager, and I wasn't going to be a part of that, so I just took a back seat. Well, anyway, it's about 2 days before the last primary, and I'm in a hotel room with him and a assemblywoman, now a congresswoman named Maxine Waters. And Jesse Jackson says to me, I'm not going to be president of the United States because white people wouldn't vote for me. And I said, no, you're not going to be president of the United States because you're not qualified. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, we elect, governors, senators, every once in a while a military leader. We don't elect the head of Operation Push to be president of the United States. And he said, well, I'm a moral leader. I said, well, if we were electing moral leaders, I'm sure Billy Graham would be elected a long time ago. He said, are you telling me that Lee Iacocca is more qualified to be president than I am? And I said, yes, he's run a corporation and you run your mouth. Well, my point in all this is that people, we have a roll of the dice when we elect the president, Democrat or Republican, a roll of the dice. And times are hard. Issues around the world are a lot different than when I was younger, and most of you were younger. They're totally different right now. Your students, will take a course, and all of a sudden, they will become geniuses in terms of politics because they took a course and they know how to work the computer. People from my generation went and knocked on doors and made phone calls, and we had a war that we were against, and that got us involved. If you go to campaign offices, any place in this state, you won't see a lot of volunteers. Some places you may see no volunteers. There's not a lot of enthusiasm. Now, with Republicans, there is because they are on the precipice of winning, winning a large victory here. Let me just turn to local politics, if I might, before I conclude. I've only voted for one Republican in my life, and that was actually 4 years ago for a woman here running for judge. I actually did her race and she won. Not because I did a race, but probably because I did a race. And we have in Cuyahoga County, as of last November, the people voted to change their form of government from 3 county commissioners, which basically is the form of government in 87 out of the 88 counties, Summit County being the exception, to a new form of government with 1 county executive and 11 county council members elected by district. And the reason that happened is because of all the scandals that have been going on with the FBI investigation, and people decided, well, we had enough. So this election is in November, and there are, I think, 6 people running, a Democrat, a Republican, the rest are some form of independents who formerly were Democrats or Republicans or whatever they are. And I am supporting the Republican. People look at me and say, how can you support a Republican, because, you're a Democrat? Well, I'm a Democrat, but I'm a Democrat who comes from a different era than what's going on here right now. I grew up in politics in this state when Democrats and Republicans talked to each other. They actually ate together, drank together. They had certain kinds of issues that were just, partisan, and we didn't deal with those, but everything over here we dealt with. I went to Columbus to lobby for a daycare bill. I was a daycare consultant at the time, and I went to a place called the Neal House, which doesn't exist anymore, where all the legislators came after session. And I walked in there, and I was naive. I was young and naive, and I said, I'm not going to talk to any of these people about business, daycare, which I was involved in, because this is like their free time. I don't want to bother them. Well, half the people in the room were lobbyists. I didn't know that, but the point was that they broke bread. These were people that came back from World War II, from the Korean War. They came and elected state rep districts of multi-county places, and going to Columbus, Ohio as a state rep was huge. It was huge. And they came there, and the guy in the next district, he may have been a Democrat or Republican, but he was a veteran. He came from a rural area. He came from whatever. They had something in common. Doesn't exist anymore. This is we and they. It just doesn't exist anymore. It's a totally different climate. So me supporting a Republican, I'm not trying to make a statement here. I'm hired, I'm a consultant, I'm hired. This is not, a volunteer activity. But we need to do something different, and maybe it can start in this county because of the corruption that's going on. And for those of you who'd like to order, pre-order a book I'm writing that'll probably be out in probably 10 or 15 years, the title of the book is "You Can't Make This Shit Up." And that. If you look at the rogues gallery of people we have here in Cuyahoga County, I mean, Jimmy DeMora, you want to buy him a plane ticket to Las Vegas, some chips, a dinner, and a prostitute who only charged $1,000 that she should have been charging by the pound. Should have made a hell of a lot more money. I get phone calls from friends of mine in Chicago, where I've done a lot of business over the years, which is the best political town in the country, and they're laughing. They said, now you have the supreme Cleveland joke. What's that? You can buy people up here for 2 TV sets. 2 TV sets. In Chicago, the last scandal they had, a guy got bribed for $1.3 million. And as somebody said, and Chicago works and Cleveland doesn't. So hopefully, with what's going on here locally, we'll have a change in government, and maybe, it'll help Cleveland to get where it should get to in the future. But on the national scene, this is all cyclical. 2 years ago, Mark could be giving my speech, and I'd be giving his speech, because things turned around. And in 2 years from now, or 4 years from now, it'll turn back. And it'll keep turning back because we really, are making educated guesses, and for many of the people, it's not even educated. And that's a problem. I'll stop there and turn it over to Mark. Thank you.
This place was more corrupted than work.
Rather than try to turn on that hand mic, I'll just
Rep that end, it
come up to
works.
the podium. Thank you very much. That was terrific. Now we'll turn to Mark Weaver. He's an award-winning national Republican political consultant and election law attorney. Over the last 2 decades, he has advised more than 500 political campaigns in 16 states. The Youngstown Vindicator called him, quote, the most prominent and successful political consultant in Ohio. Present company excluded.
Of course.
The Cincinnati Enquirer agreed, calling him a top professional and a veteran Republican strategist. Early in his career, Mr. Weaver was a communications director with the Republican caucus of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives and ran a Philadelphia area political consulting firm. Later, as a national communications consultant, he worked one-on-one with Ronald Reagan. Mr. Weaver has advised many GOP candidates for governor, U.S. Senate, Congress, judge, and statewide office. He has also advised the Republican legislative campaign committees in the Ohio House, the Ohio Senate, the North Dakota Senate, and the Pennsylvania House. He has written dozens of campaign plans, supervised countless polls and focus groups, and produced more than 1,000 TV and radio commercials, and many of them award-winning. He teaches election law and advanced campaign management at the University of Akron and media law at Ohio State's Law School. And in 2004, he was one of the lead attorneys and strategists in the legal efforts surrounding President Bush's election and recount in Ohio. And he's a native of Pennsylvania. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, good evening. Weren't we lucky to hear from Jerry? I mean, he is, first of all, I consider him a friend. The class that you just heard about in my advanced campaign management class, I am pleased to say that Jerry and I swap off every year. I teach 1 year, he teaches the other. He's done a great job. It's a graduate class. For those of you professors, you should know that, you can tell your students, you can get a master's degree in campaign management at the University of Akron. It's one of only 7 universities in the country that offer that. And it's different than the academic pursuits. I have a bachelor's and master's in political science, and taught in graduate school as a graduate assistant. And the academic pursuit is important, but what we do at Bliss is meant to be more practical, less theoretical and long-term, more practical and short-term. We essentially train students to be campaign managers and consultants and lobbyists and fundraisers, candidates. And so I'm pleased not only to teach there with Jerry, but I was also honored 5 years ago, 6 years ago, Jerry and I were both at the same ceremony awarded honorary certificates of applied politics for our work together, and over the years for our respective candidates. So we were fortunate to hear Jerry. He is a strong, passionate Democrat, but he is also honest enough to tell you the cracks, in his own party foundation, and I hope I can do the same thing from the Republican viewpoint. I'm sorry I wasn't able to join you for dinner and for the cocktail hour. Just thought I'd give you a slice of life of what it's like for a consultant like Jerry and me this time of year. I was in Utah this week for a conference, which sounds like fun, but because it's election time and I have 22 clients, all of whom believe they're the first client in the pecking order, I would take conference calls every morning from 6 a.m. until 8 a.m. and then go to my conference that I was there for, and every break return phone calls, and then the evening conference calls till typically 10 or 11, and then sit down to 150 to 200 emails to return before I went to bed, and then go to bed around 2 a.m., up at 6 a.m. the next thing. That was my Utah. Got in last night at 11, unpacked my bag, repacked my bag, reacquainted myself with my children and my wife. This morning, woke up in Columbus, drove to Cincinnati. That's about 2 hours. Spent the day with my client, Rob Portman. Left there at 3:20. That's a 4-hour and 10-minute drive here. Stopped at Bob Evans for dinner. Tonight I'll be with you. When I leave here, I will drive to Youngstown, overnight at Youngstown. 7 a.m. crew call tomorrow for a film shoot. First shot at 8 a.m., last shot at 10:30 p.m. tomorrow night. 2 hours back to Columbus, and then see my daughter sing in church Sunday morning, and perhaps, just perhaps, get an hour or two of rest on Sunday before it starts all again on Monday. And so when people say 38 days left, to people like Jerry and me, that's good news. Because whether we're winning or losing, we know that we get a break in 38 days. And even though I'm an election lawyer, even though I was one of the lead attorneys for President Bush in 2004, we do not like recounts. We like to have the weekend after the election to be for family and friends, and not for counting votes at the Board of Elections and squabbling with the other side about who stole the election, who didn't. What I thought I would do is brought with me some poll numbers, which are from an outstanding national polling firm that I know Jerry is familiar with, Public Opinion Strategies. Probably one of the top Republican firms in the country. Their data is real, their data is valuable, and I thought their stuff would be good for us to talk about tonight. So that's me, that's my company, Communications Council. This is mostly recent data, and for those of you who wonder whether it's rigged or not, I think Jerry would agree. For when we poll in campaigns, it's too important for us to rig the polls. We want real data. I had one of my students asked me once, yeah, but can't you make the answers be whatever you want? Yes, I can make the answers be whatever I want, but I'm not going to spend $20,000 to make the answers be whatever they want. I need good intelligence. I need to know where the other side's strong, where I'm weak, and vice versa. So these polls are done with real purposes in mind, not to convince people something phony's happening, but rather to inform people like Jerry and I to make good political decisions. So let's take a look at where things stand in Ohio. And Jerry was exactly correct. I think we did one of these 4 years ago, and we could switch places. His party was on the verge of a big win, and my party was on the verge of a big loss, and I think we'd all agree it's changed around now. Here's some things you need to know about the election, at least in Ohio. And for many of you, if the faculty members in the room are like most of the faculty members I know, for many of you this will be a disappointment, because I'm one of the few Republicans who teaches at the graduate level, both in law school and graduate schools. That's just a fact of academic life in America. So I'm not saying this to be, I want to be as academic about it as I can, but it won't be good news if you consider yourself a partisan Democrat. Right now, the election is about Barack Obama and to a lesser extent Nancy Pelosi. And I had an eye-opener about 6 months ago. A lot of my candidates were using the name of Pelosi in their districts. I've got congressional districts, I've got state senate, all kind of candidates, and they were using Pelosi. And I said, why are you talking about Nancy Pelosi? That is such an insider name. I know who she is, but I watch C-SPAN all day, right? Well, we did a poll, and believe it or not, in Ohio, Nancy Pelosi is known by about 2/3 of the people, with a very unfavorable, extremely unfavorable. If she were run against Tom Noe, you remember Tom Noe? Tom Noe would win. That's neither good nor bad, it's just true. Let's take a look at this data here. Whoop, not all my, well, that's weird. Let's do this. My titles aren't loading right, so maybe if I go down and open it this way, it'll be better. Here's hoping. All right. This looks a little better already. There we go. Here's the approval rating for Barack Obama over the last 3 months. And if you look at the far left-hand side of your screen, you'll see that was February, and the blue is his approval, and the red is his disapproval. And watch how it goes from 2009 all the way through where we are now. This was late August, early September of 2010. You can see his number has his favorability has gone down and his unfavorability has gone up. This had to be expected, friends. I tell this story a lot. People don't believe me. It's on tape somewhere if you want to go find it. I spoke to a group like this, about 150 people, at the California University of Pennsylvania, which is a state school in Pennsylvania. Students, faculty. It was about a week after the presidential election, and I dare say I was the only Republican in the room, maybe 2 or 3 others. And a couple academics spoke, a couple consultants, Democrats spoke, then it was my turn. And I'm talking about the election and what happened, and I said, now, when Barack Obama stumbles, when he stumbles in the next few months, and there was a gasp in the room, that I would suggest that he could stumble. And then the other speakers who got up after me all pilloried me for suggesting that it would be possible that Barack Obama could stumble. Well, set aside your feelings about Barack Obama as a person. Is there any person who will assume the mantle of the presidency and not stumble? No. We're all imperfect humans. We're all going to make mistakes. Take away your partisan views, no matter who's the president, there's going to be a mistake. So I tell that story not because it's particularly interesting about what happened to me, but because the expectations that were raised among many people, to the point where you see these numbers now tanking. Right? Look at the key groups where he's approving and disapproving. Again, remember the blue is approve and the red is disapprove. The total is 45-49. Remember, this is nationally based on an NBC Wall Street Journal poll. Amongst older voters, 65 plus, what do we know, political scientists, about the older you are, the more likely you are to vote? All right? So you can tell he's doing particularly poor amongst older voters. That next number is very important. Jerry and I spent a lot of time looking at the crosstabs of independent voters and what they're doing, because they really are running the show. White voters, and then white women who have traditionally been a variable group and open to persuasion on both sides. You can see the disapproval is very high there amongst those key groups. Here's the Ohio numbers. A little tighter on the total side over here on the left. And then when you see amongst independents, it's gotten worse for him. Not terrible, but it's enough to swing an election.
What was the percentage underneath those numbers? Independents.
These numbers here are as a percentage of the all voters as a whole. So of the people as a whole, 34 were considered independent in these polls. That's a different month it was taken. It was 32. In September, that's 44. People who self-identified. Okay? That doesn't bode well for the Democrats' chances in the fall. Typically, presidents with less than 50% approval rating lose an average of 41 seats in Congress, and this shows you some of the trends all the way going back to 1962. We all know, of course, the off-year election curse for every president, so that's to be expected. The big question everyone wants to know is, how much bigger will it be? Will it be, as Jerry said, much bigger than 94? Will it be slightly less? I'm actually one of the naysayers of my party. I don't think it's going to be as big as some of the people say it's going to be, frankly. But I still think it's going to be bigger than the average. This is, of course, an economic election. Candidates who are campaigning on other topics are fools, with the small exception of perhaps corruption in Cuyahoga County, which is the big issue up here. Although you can argue there's an economic aspect to that as well. Because when government is being stolen, that means we're not getting value out of government, so there's a direct connection. When you ask people what are the most important things they care about in the race for Congress, this is a national poll in late August, early September, you can see the economy jumps out. But lest you think that these other issues might be close, we can actually take several of these and add them to economy to call them pocketbook issues. The federal budget deficit is a pocketbook issue. Taxes is a pocketbook issue. So you can get up to near 50% pretty quickly with people offering up on their own what's bothering them. I've seen polls in Ohio where this number is closer to 75% when you add all pocketbook issues together. This is an economic election. And Americans don't think it's going to get better anytime soon. Some of you are economics professors, and I defer to you on what a recession is, but I do know this, that American public opinion lags behind actual recessions. And so they think things are better even when the economy is starting to tank, and they think things are worse even when the economy is starting to improve. That's the nature of a distracted public. And so about 40% say it's starting to improve, 34 will still get worse, 22 not getting any better. This is, of course, the Ohio example of the graph I showed you 2 slides ago. You can see 53% bringing jobs and business to the state, and there's several other economic issues, or we could call them pocketbook issues, state government spending, state taxes. Pretty quickly you see this is not an election about anything other than that, even in Ohio. But there's some ideological components as well. Let's look at those. Most voters believe, and I know this is in this part of Cleveland, I'm probably speaking heresy, that Obama is too liberal and spends too much and is a socialist. Look at the numbers. All right? You don't have to agree with them, but this is a democracy poll. These are Democrats. I think it's Paul Begala and I forget the woman pollster's name, but she's a Democrat. So this is a Democrat group. I think Carville is also associated with these guys. Of the people who think that, now I'm going to read you a list of words which describe, which people use to describe political figures. For each word or phrase, tell me whether it describes Barack Obama very well, not too well, or not well at all. Too liberal, 57%. That describes him pretty well. A big spender, 62%, describes him well. Socialist, 55% describes him well. Jerry and I will agree on, well, we agree on a lot of things, but we'll agree on this. In politics, perception is reality. So, save your argument for why he's not a socialist, because the belief is he is, and then that belief will have to change quickly if he's going to be set up for re-election in 2012. There's also been a major shift away from the belief that government should do more. The role of government has gone back and forth over the last 40 years between Lyndon Johnson with the Great Society and then Ronald Reagan with trying to scale down government. Even Bill Clinton, the era of big government is over. And when you ask people whether government should do more to solve problems, in July of 2008, 53% said, yeah, government needs to do more. Look at where we are now in June 2010. That's down to 40, and the majority is flipped over to government is doing too many things that are better left to businesses and individuals. So for all the Democrat legislative successes, few voters believe these policies will benefit them personally. So people say, what happened? Barack Obama got the stimulus passed, he got health care passed. Why doesn't that mean anything to people? Well, here's why. Because people don't believe that those things have an impact on their life. So if you look over here on the left-hand side, and this is a CBS poll, so far have Barack Obama's economic programs helped you personally? And the vast majority, 63%, said they had no effect on them personally. And over on the right-hand side, so far, do you think the government stimulus package has made the economy better? The vast majority, no impact. Now, some of you economics professors will probably argue that it takes longer for things like that to have an impact. The voters are impatient. Financial reform and health care, same thing. Essentially, people don't think they're having any impact at all. So this is the worst anti-incumbent environment that these pollsters, Republicans and Democrats alike, the worst anti-incumbent environment ever tested. And that includes, of course, the horrible anti-incumbent year of '94, the horrible anti-incumbent year of 2006, which I lived through, and we all did, and 2008 was largely an anti-incumbent year as well. Incumbents beware. Look at this question. In the next election for Congress, do you feel your representative deserves to be reelected, or do you want to give a new person a chance? Jerry and I often put this in our polls. You want to see whether someone will vote for a new person without a name to them. And if you look over here in the far right-hand side in the yellow, you can see that 57% of the people want a new person. This is a national poll, NBC Wall Street Journal. So congressional incumbents have a lot to worry about. In fact, it's been said that maybe all you need to do is a 10-second ad if you're running for Congress. Hi, I'm Mark Weaver. I've never been to Washington. I'm Mark Weaver, and I approve this ad. Many would choose to replace every member of Congress if given the option. If there were a place in the ballot that allowed you to vote to defeat and replace every single member of Congress, including your own, would you do this or not? Look at these numbers. Yes, 50%. In June, 47%. It's about split. About half the electorate would said, throw them all out, start over. But that negativity is aimed at Democratic control of government, putting the wind at GOP's back. This is what Jerry was talking about when he said, some of it's luck, some of it's tides. This is tide. Voters believe Democratic control of government has been bad for the nation. So the question was, Democrats have been in control of both the House and Senate and Congress and the White House for the last year and a half. Do you think this has been good or bad for the country? Total, 50% bad. Republicans, you expect them to be bad, 90%. The key data, of course, is right there in the middle of the slide, is the independent voters, 44%. That is a healthy, outside the margin, statistically significant difference amongst independent voters. The generic vote, this is the measure that people like Jerry and I use to figure out where parties are going as far as congressional. So if there was an election held today for Congress, and without putting any names to it, would you vote for the Republican or the Democrat? We call this the generic ballot. I don't know why this slide has the blue and the red switched. That's kind of confusing. But if you look, you can see Democrats in 08 were better off, and that has gotten narrowly, almost exactly dead even now. So the generic ballot has gotten worse for Democrats. And Dems, of course, have lost ground amongst some of the key swing voters. We talked about independents before. There's your 2006 average up on the top, and then here is your 2010 average. And amongst independent white women and older voters, you can see it has swung the other way. Here in Ohio, the electorate looks much different than it did in 2008. This is the party identification. In Ohio, we don't register in parties. We register to vote, and we become a member of a party when we pull a ballot. But this is based on what people say they are. And so you can see kind of close in 2000. Look all the way over there in 2010. There's about a 3% increase for Republicans. It's funny, I was polling in one congressional district about a month ago, and this is one that John McCain won 52-48 back in 2008. And when we asked people, a representative sample of the voters, who they had voted for president in 2008, 60% of them had voted for John McCain. What has happened here? Well, what's happened is buyer's remorse or embarrassment to tell people that you voted for Barack Obama, at least amongst those people who switched. The generic Republican gubernatorial candidate scores much higher amongst independents than either Bush or McCain. So we're seeing even that is true for a generic gubernatorial candidate, not just a congressional candidate. So there's also a strong edge in what we call intensity. This is simply the notion of which parties raring to vote. In 2008, Democrats were raring to vote. In 2010, it's Republicans. Of the people who consider themselves highly interested in the election, Republicans, 46% of them highly interested. Democrats, 38% of them. Independents, 39% of them. All right? And the Republican candidate for governor has a significant edge among those voters who are most interested. This gives us a sense of what the turnout's going to be. If Republican is more intense, you can see there's going to be a net effect here for the Republican Party and the candidate for governor. The generic governor's ballot today compared to 2008, you can see the Republicans go from down 32 to up by 39, 37. Even though this election is all about the Democrats, the national Republican brand is improving. It needs to. It took a real beating over the last couple of years. And I'm here to tell you, much of this is not about, wow, the Republicans are so wonderful, I can't run to them fast enough. A lot of this is the Republicans were bums, we threw them out 2 years ago. And these Democrats, they're bums, we're going to throw them out too. And some people would say that's a schizophrenic kind of approach by the voters, and he wouldn't be terribly wrong. Right? Recent polling shows the image of the Democrats has fallen precipitously. If you ask people their feelings towards certain organizations, whether they feel favorably, you can see the red Democrats has gone down and the blue Republican has marginally gotten better. So this bears out my point. It's much more about dissatisfaction with the Democrats than it is about happiness amongst the Republicans. On all the issues, Republicans have the edge in almost all of them. The environment, the Democrats still have the edge. Healthcare slightly, but that's within the margin of error. Everywhere else, they see Republicans as better able to do it. And the percentage of people saying the Democrat Party is too liberal is up 10 points in the last 2 years. And that's obviously, that's a battle the Democrats fight, just like it's a battle the Republicans fight. Republicans fight with their right wing, and Democrats fight with their left wing, and the people in the middle think that both parties are too extreme. Democrat efforts to make this a choice election fought on local issues rather than a referendum election fought on national issues is destined to fail. Why is that? Because the election has been nationalized. People are voting for Congress not on their local issues. They want to send a message to Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama that things have gone too far. All of the data I've seen is that these independent voters do not hate Barack Obama. They just don't think he's up to the job. It's a different thing. And I've got to counsel my candidates that. I don't want their rhetoric to be, isn't Barack Obama an evil person? Well, he's not an evil person. He's a nice person. He's a nice person who is outmatched by the challenges he faces, and the voters are disappointed in him. That's the rhetoric that will resonate with most voters. You know, it's funny, look at this. In 2010, these are different Democrat strategists, all of whom are saying that this election is about a choice, meaning don't go with the national issues, you should look at the choice happening on local issues. Well, what's funny is that same rhetoric was from Republican strategists in 2006 as they were being geared up for a big loss. It's the go-to rhetoric when you don't have much left to talk about. All right? So it didn't work all that well because obviously the Republicans lost 51 seats in the House and then 14 in the Senate and 7 governor's races. And so part of what we're seeing this year is certainly a correction from that. But the Democrats think it'll work for them. Well, no, we don't think it will. The wave has the potential to be deep. Here's the Cook political report. I don't know what your view is, Jerry. Which prognosticator do you like the best? I like Cook. Who do you follow?
Not me.
Yeah, Jerry, other than the Austin report, which you should all subscribe to, there's several of them out there. Charlie Cook, former Democrat House staffer, so he's no Republican shill. He's one of the keener guys. This is his September outlook right now of which seats are likely to go Democrat, which seats are likely to go Republican. Of all the prognosticators, he's the one who earliest on said the House of Representatives would switch to the Republicans. And very few people are not predicting that anymore. Now they're just arguing over whether it'll be by a couple seats or whether it'll be by a lot of seats. There's some past election results. I don't want to bog you too much in the details. The bottom line is, in 2006 and 2008, everything stuck to Republicans like Velcro and bounced off Democrats with Teflon. Here's some political cartoons that reminded of us. There's George Bush on the left. There's the Velcro president. And on the right, the Democrats beating the Republican elephant. Here's some more recent political cartoons. Barack Obama needing a recoat of Teflon because of his problems. And then there's the political cartoon of the Republicans stomping the Democrats. Well, it's 38 days now if we did this yesterday. What I want to show some local polls, so I know a lot of you are interested in Ohio races. This is, if you want a great website to go to watch politics, Real Clear Politics is probably the best, realclearpolitics.com. And they keep an average of all the different polling data that's public. And this is recent as of late last week. The RCP average, that's this yellow bar here, shows Kasich up by an average of 10.7. Now, for the statisticians and for those of us who took graduate level statistics, taking all these different polls and mashing them together like that to get an average is probably creates some statistical problems. But we can see a trend. Whether or not 10.7 is the right number, we can see a trend. However, the one that I would throw out is the plus 17 at Quinnipiac is ridiculous. I see nothing like that internally. That's way, way out there. Everything else I see is much closer to high single digits or 10 or 11. Kasich versus Strickland. In this case, Kasich is red and Strickland is blue. You can see back from '09, Kasich starting out low and some weird ups and downs, and he's now ended up high. Strickland starting out middle-ish and ending up lowish. That's a bad trend. My friend and client Rob Portman running against my old adversary Lee Fisher. This is my third race against Lee Fisher, who is a native of this area. His average is, according to Real Clear Politics, plus 12. That race is not over. No race is over, but this is the safest bet on the Republican ballot in Ohio this year. Josh Mandel of Cleveland might be the second safest bet. But Rob Portman is a very strong candidate, and they will be doing 3 debates in the next 3 weeks or 4 weeks. So look for those. One of them will be here in Cleveland on October 12th at the City Club if you want to come by and see these two very articulate people debating the issues. And here's the Senate, the trend from Real Clear Politics from '09. Again, Portman is in the red, starts out low, winds up high. Fisher starts out in the middle. For a guy who's run statewide so many times, you'd think Lee Fisher would be a little stronger. He ran in '90 for Attorney General and won, '94 for Attorney General and lost, '98 for Governor and lost, 2006 as Lieutenant Governor and won, and then again 2010 for Senate. You'd think he'd start a little higher. For some reason, Ohioans have not warmed to Lee Fisher. Look at the Cleveland number here in the Kasich and Strickland race. This is, I forget where my staff got this from, but it was in the field just a week or two ago. Here in the Cleveland area, where you would expect Strickland to be winning by a much bigger margin, it's 50-46. And at that cell size, that's dead even. That's within the margin of error at that cell size. Once you plunge into the cells and start looking at crosstabs like Cleveland area, you're going to saw that dead even. People like Jerry who've run Democrat campaigns know that Democrats have to rack up big numbers in Northeast Ohio in order to overcome Republican gains in Southwest and Western Ohio. In fact, if you look at the traditional pattern of how people win Ohio, this is the presidential election. The most familiar shape you see is a inverted C. You imagine the blue making a C. And what the blue is doing, of course, for political scientists is, it's, except for Columbus and Dayton and Cincinnati, it's following the water, which follows the patterns of industry, which follows the patterns of immigrants to work the industry, which follows the original New Deal coalition, which to me as a political scientist is fascinating, and it's consistent with almost year to year. This is the 2004 presidential election. You still see the reverse C, but it wasn't enough to overcome George Bush everywhere else. This was the Strickland-Blackwell race. In this case, Strickland is blue, Blackwell is red, and the darkness of the county shows you the strength of the ballot. I can't imagine that we would have fielded a weaker candidate in 2006. 2006 was not only a bad year for Republicans, but Ohio Republicans had a particularly weak candidate. Here's Sherrod Brown's victory. 2006, once again, you're seeing some of that same inverted C. Tim Hagan, I did this race against Tim Hagan. A good guy, good with a quip. Probably want to have a beer with the guy, but Ohioans did not want him as the governor. In fact, didn't you and I have that race against each other that year, Jerry? Yeah, that was the year with Taft won that one. Here's our current cash on hand. Money isn't everything in politics, but it's important. The governor has been a very strong fundraiser. Do not count the governor out. You've not heard me call this race from this podium tonight. I think that race is tighter than people think it's going to be. You never count a sitting governor out. He's been very strong in fundraising. His ad up that he has up this week is his best ad so far. I agree with Jerry. He started on the wrong message. He should have taken the ad he ran this week and ran at the beginning. Things might be different. This is why Rob Portman will win, not just because he's a great candidate who's articulate with a great vision, but the money difference is so damaging that national Democrats will not give to Lee Fisher because national Democrats believe the race to be over. Early voting has changed the way we do things in Ohio. Not every state has this. For those of you not from Ohio, you don't have to be senior citizen out of the county. You're sick now to vote absentee. You can do it for no reason at all. And so we expect as many as a third, that of the voters to vote by absentee ballot. In some counties, like Cuyahoga, the boards of elections are mailing out absentee ballot requests to everybody, which will only up those participation. And for strategists like Jerry and me, it adds to the problem of we now have 32 election days when we used to just have one. And so I told an AP reporter the other day, same, when it comes to your resources to persuading voters, same amount of peanut butter, much bigger piece of bread to spread it across. And that's hard for all campaigns. Let's look at a couple of the commercials, and then we'll open it up to questions. Some of you have seen this. This is one of Ted Strickland's attack ads.
For 8 years, John Kasich was a managing director for Lehman Brothers, one of the Wall Street banks responsible for the crash that hurt Ohio's economy. Lehman Brothers hid toxic loans from regulators and gave out more than $16 billion in bonuses while Kasich was a managing director. Then Lehman Brothers collapsed. But Kasich refuses to reveal how big all his bonuses were or how much he was paid. Ask John Kasich to explain how he got rich on Wall Street.
It's the third-party attack ad. These have had the effect of raising Kasich's unfavorable. They have not had any effect of raising Ted Strickland's favorable. Here's a John Kasich ad. This is by the Republican Governors Association.
1,250 jobs gone.
NCR?
Yeah. Strickland couldn't hold on to them. Moved to Georgia.
Fishbein and Novellis moved jobs there too.
We lost 400,000 jobs under Strickland.
It's gotta be a world record. Strickland doesn't get the jobs done.
Wonder when ours go.
There were several of these in this series of people talking quietly to one another, which I didn't quite understand when I watched them, but I asked my staff to pick this one because I thought this was the best of the series. It reminded me a little bit of The Office, the television show The Office, those kind of characters. So that's been running. RGA's been very strong in Ohio. Here's a Lee Fisher ad.
Right out of the box, he's blaming others for the economy. But after 2 decades in Washington, what's Rob Portman's record? As George Bush's top trade official, Portman backed deals that shipped tens of thousands of Ohio jobs overseas. On Portman's watch, our trade deficit with China grew $31 billion. And in Congress, Portman voted to give $30 billion in tax breaks to corporations exporting our jobs. Washington insider, Rob Portman. He's not what Ohio needs.
I'm Lee Fisher, and I approve this message.
And I'm on a telephone line because I didn't record that at my film shoot. You're going to see Lee Fisher call Rob Portman a Washington insider and use the name Bush a lot. Let's see what Mr. Portman's going to say about Lee Fisher.
Was first elected in 1980. He's still at it. Lieutenant Governor. Ohio's jobs are.
The lead point person in our administration, saving and creating jobs.
Jobs? What jobs?
We've been able to save, to create, and to attract jobs.
Lee Fisher believes he's been so good at creating jobs, he deserves promotion. Do you? Rob Portman gets it. He has a jobs plan to get Ohio back on track.
I'm Rob Portman, and I approve this message.
So you'll see lots of this coming to a TV near you. And then there's the averages there for some of the guys there. One other couple things I want to show you is what's interesting is what's happening around the country on the right side of the Republican Party. The Tea Party, in particular, some amazingly creative ads, which for people in this part of northeastern Ohio will seem like they're from Mars. But from other parts of this state, there'll be a lot of hell yes when they see this. Now, none of these are Ohio, but if you haven't seen these, you might enjoy watching them, even if you don't agree with them.
I wish there was a political party I could vote for with a brain or courage or a high.
I don't care about political parties. I just want a home that isn't blown away by debt. Oh, Charlie.
I'll put you in debt for generations.
Oh, that's not it at all, Toto. Hello, my pretty. I will save you from those evil Republicans. First pay $18,000 a month for my downtown office, and then go into massive debt for Wall Street bailouts. And here are my monkeys to make you pay for it all. Thank you for saving us. Who are you?
I'm John Dennis. I'm running for Congress. I believe in following the Constitution, and I believe in reducing debt, and I believe it's time to throw a little water on politicians who say one thing and do another, like Nancy Pelosi.
We're home, Toto. We're home.
Okay,
I'm John Dennis, and I approve
he's
this.
not going to beat Nancy Pelosi,
Dennis for Congress.
but can we agree it was a fun commercial to watch? I mean, wow, that's crazy. Here's another one. You might enjoy this one.
And I would impeach him. And if that's not enough, some of you men own taverns. Sam, you are a brewer. Mr. President, a distiller. You know how tough it is to run a small business without a tyrannical government on your back. Today, we have an internal revenue service that enforces what they call a progressive income tax. You'll love this. Every year, as an IRB recorder, we're basically required to spy on ourselves, report what we earn, who we hire and fire, with an all-powerful separate court system. Without representation, they can increase taxes, add costly regulation, or perform malicious audits. Now, this same IRS is going to force us to buy health insurance, cram it down our throats, or else. Now, I took an oath to defend that with my life. Now, I can't stand by while these evils are perpetrated. You gentlemen revolted over a T-tax. A T-tax. Now look at us. Are you with me?
Gather your armies.
Oh, that's a funny spot. Okay, one more. This is actually before I show this is the last one I'm going to show. The other two are Tea Party, far right, conservative fantasy spots that won't ever get anywhere. And this next one, this guy will probably win because number one, whoever produced this spot has a good eye for TV. Number two, it's from the Northwoods of I think Minnesota, where being a lumberjack is a well-known important thing. And number three, the use of the visual metaphor of the axe. Take a look. Much more mainstream.
I come from a long line of lumberjacks. My family has a proud heritage of swinging the axe. I've always been quick to take on a big piece of timber, and I'm just as ready to topple the big spending in Washington. Our national debt has grown sky high thanks to the liberals in D.C. I'll work in Congress to cut the spending and balance the budget. I'm Sean Duffy, and I approve this message because I'll bring the axe to Washington.
That might be the best political ad of the cycle. I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you for inviting me here tonight.
Terrific. All right. We will go to your questions.
Anyone, if you can take that. As insiders, do you think politics has gotten meaner and more vicious, or has it always been blood sport?
Yes. It's meaner and it's more vicious, and it's probably because the ability to buy TV is you need the money to buy TV, but when I started out in this business, if you were running for state rep, you weren't on TV. You weren't on the radio. You probably were knocking on doors. You probably weren't even in the mailbox. You're knocking on doors. Now somebody running for state rep in a highly important race here with, what's it, $250,000, $400,000, $500,000 race, you're on TV, you're on cable TV. And so the ability to communicate on certain, on different levels with a harsher kind of spot, I think is more apparent. I should say, I don't know if you know this, but I have a friend of mine who Mark knows, who's the brother of the former governor. His name is Ted Celeste. And he first ran for state representative in 2006 at age 60. He'd never run, he'd run before, but a long time ago. Anyway, he called me up, and he's my lifelong friend, and he said, I want you to do my race. I said, of course, I'll do your race. And he said, no, I want you to do my race my way. I said, what's your way? Only positive spots, nothing negative. I said, well, you're running against a two-term incumbent who's the head of the insurance committee, who's taken all this money from the insurance company and does their bidding. I don't care. I won't mention his name. It's all about positive, positive, positive. And unless somebody does a positive campaign and wins, we'll continue to do negative. Well, he won in 2006. He won in 2008. He'll win again this time. Ain't nobody else doing it, though.
You know, I'll probably get the race wrong. I think it was Grover Cleveland's race for president when he was accused to have fathered a child out of wedlock, and the sing-song rally of the opposing party was, "Ma, ma, where's my pa? Went to the White House, ha ha ha." So mean and nasty politics has been around for as long as people have been around. What's new and what troubles me is the newest variation of the internet. The fellow who draws that cartoon called Bloom County with that cute little penguin named Opus, you ever read this great cartoon? I read something that he wrote. His name is Burke Breathitt. He wrote something a few months ago that really struck me. he's retired now. He made all of his money, and so he can just think big thoughts. And he said, he was talking about how people go on the internet and can write whatever they want without any responsibility or nobody knows who they are. And so the quote went something like this. He said, "Satan works his will in the anonymous comment sections of the internet, and he can have it." And I thought that was very articulate and profound, because what we're seeing now is if there's an article that's written today about Jerry and I speaking on the Plain Dealer website, on the cleveland.com, by tomorrow morning, there'll be 30 anonymous comments, 15 of which calling him horrible names, and the other 15 of which calling me horrible names. And then my defenders will get on and say things that are, overly excessive about me, and then Jerry's defenders will get on. And by the end, there might be 120 comments, none of which has advanced anything other than sort of sharp elbows and blood sport. So although I think it's been around for a while, we're seeing new iterations of it. Yes, Gwen.
Mr. Austin, you acknowledged in your speech that young people voted in record numbers back in 2008. Do either of you think that will continue this year and in 2012, 2014? Or do you think they were just lured out by, Obama's appeal to young people?
Well, first of all, keep in mind that no matter what else is going on in this country, there's one thing that you can take to the bank. More people vote in the presidential year than vote in the non-presidential year. So therefore, less young people and everybody else will be voting in this election. But the thing to watch for is, as you know, every year somebody becomes 18 and can register to vote. So do they register to vote, and do they get involved in elections leading up to 2012? And that's what you got to look for. And is there somebody that turns people on? Are they registering to vote because they want to vote? Like when I became 21 at the time, I couldn't wait to vote. It wasn't about anybody. It was just voting. Well, now maybe it's about a candidate.
Good for you for being here. There should be more younger people here. Every year, or every presidential year, we hear this is going to be the year when young people are going to wake up and do something different and get involved. And every year, as a percentage, older people vote more than younger people. I don't think that's going to change. Maybe at the margins a little bit. If you studied Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is an amazing concept that helps me inform my decisions as a political consultant many times, is the people at the bottom part of the hierarchy are worried about things other than big thoughts like what sort of policy should we have. And young people aren't necessarily at the bottom looking for food and water, but they're moving their way up. And so the older you get, the more likely you are to think about, it matters what kind of country we live in. And so people like you, God bless you, we need more young people like that. But I think it's part of the human condition that as you get older, you get a bigger picture. And a bigger picture makes you want to participate more.
Mr. Weaver, you already mentioned this. I'm wondering, I'd love to hear from both of you, what the impact of early voting and mail-in voting is on campaigns. How do you adapt your strategy? I know in Oregon, for example, everybody mails in their vote. And that's obviously going to be growing and increasing, primarily because I understand it's a lot cheaper. But how do you adapt your campaign strategy to that?
Well, I've been using the peanut butter analogy all week because I've got this 3 different reporters ask me. I'll try to come up with a different analogy. But the problem we face is only a certain small percentage of people are willing to donate to political candidates. It's down around the 2 or 3% number of people who donate to candidates. So unless you have a candidate who can write a big check, and occasionally you get that, Meg Whitman in California can write a big check. Mr. Bloomberg in New York City can write a big check. So unless you have somebody who can self-fund, and if you know someone like that and they're Democrat, have them call Jerry, and if you know someone like that and they're Republican, have them call me. But most of them have to go out and raise the money. And so you have a set pot of resources. Remember, in politics, we have 3 limited resources: time, people, and money. And how we spend them matters. And used to be, I'd say to my judicial campaigns, I do a lot of judge races, let's save all of our TV time till the last 5 days, and then we'll blanket the airwaves, people will see you and you'll win. Well, that strategy doesn't work as well when as many as a third of the people will have cast their ballots before that. And so we have to find ways to take that same amount of money and be creative and spread it out over that longer time. Second problem is elections are much less susceptible to the old term October surprise. All right, Mr. DeMore got taken away in handcuffs last week. For those of you not from Cleveland, local county commissioner got arrested. Big news. If that had happened 29 October, it would have had less an impact on the election because many of the ballots would have been sent in by then. And although in Ohio you are allowed to show up on election day and renounce your absentee ballot, almost nobody does it. So resources is harder, and the election starts getting locked in earlier. So that's why Mr. Strickland's got a problem, because people start voting next week, and he's not overcome the difference yet. Jerry was right. It's not good when you hold a conference call to put out and say, our numbers show we're getting beat by a lesser amount than the other numbers show we're getting beat on. So Kasich will lock in these early votes, and it would take a lot for Strickland to overcome that. Jerry, what's your view?
Politics is a science and an art. The science is who's going to vote, and the art is how do you communicate with that person to get him vote for your candidate on one day. What happens with early voting is that it changes everything, and will continue to change everything. Giving Mark's point about you have a certain amount of money, now you have to decide when you spend that money. We've had enough early voting to this point to basically have the ability to say 5% of the people will vote as soon as they get their ballot. And by the time the third week of early voting transpires, 50% of those people who got their ballot will vote. In other words, we're starting to develop a definition of the early voter. We've been talking about the person for years who is the primary voter in a primary or the frequent voter in a general election. Now we have a frequent early voter. Therefore, we're going to communicate with that person, and we're going to start to do something a little bit different than we have in the past, which was usually early voting we communicate by mail, and we call what they call chase pieces. You know, we get the person's name, he sent in for his ballot, they get 15 pieces of mail from some candidate or a bunch of candidates, and they throw them all in the garbage. Now you're going to start to see TV a lot earlier. You're seeing it already, because early voting starts October 2nd. These spots are have been on the air for a lot of reasons, especially to affect the early voter. In Oregon, as you point out, we got no choice in Oregon. It's state law. But what this is all going to lead to, and probably not in my lifetime, is people will be voting on the internet. They'll never leave their house, and that'll happen. But early voting now has become a part of our planning, a part of our budgeting, a part of a campaign, and a serious part.
Yes, right up here. He's going to hand you a microphone.
Thank you. I wondered, anecdotally, I heard people be very upset about the Wall Street bailout and the bailout of GM, which happened in 2009. So I looked at your numbers, and it doesn't really seem like that was the reason for why people are so upset with the National Democratic Party. So I wondered if that had any kind of, was there a delay, or is there some other major factor that's really driving what people are feeling, or is it just that things haven't turned around, so it's jobs, jobs, jobs?
Well, keep in mind, I think was it this week, we were told the recession is over. I mean, it was over in June of last year. Now, you go to people that are hurting, who had their houses foreclosed on, or are looking for a job, or their pensions in doubt, and you tell them the recession's over, they go, oh, well, I feel better already. The point is that whether it's GM or anything else, was it the right thing to do at the right time? Probably. Is GM going to pay back the money, and even more? Probably. But as Mark pointed out, you don't feel, the recovery as quickly, and people right now don't feel it, even though it's supposedly happening, and that's the real problem. And you take that out on the party in power.
So, I like that you said anecdotally, because I think that's the point, is I am no political PhD, being able to figure out all these patterns. My clients give me a short-term goal, get them elected, and then I try to get them elected, and I look backwards and try to figure out what happened. But I don't do it the way political scientists do with careful studies. But here's my sense, is that what happened here was not any one event. It wasn't TARP, it wasn't stimulus, it wasn't GM bailout, it wasn't the Wall Street bailouts, it wasn't the health care bill, it wasn't the BP oil spill, it was all of that together. And it was oomphed by, is that a word, oomphed? It was oomphed by over-promises by both parties each time they got in. So the morning after the '06 election, give you an Ohio example, I was up till 3, you wonder why I keep these hours, up till 3, and then agreed to do an 8 a.m. breakfast campaign overview like this the next morning. Won't do that again. But it was after a terrible loss for my party. So I was there at the athletic club in Columbus, Ohio, with a Democrat and a couple reporters, and they said, so Mark, what's the election takeaway from 2006? I said, here's my message for Ted Strickland. The good news is you won. The bad news is you won. Go turn around Ohio. Go create 300,000 jobs. Go fix the school funding that you said in the Supreme Court brief is easily fixed if you simply have the political will. None of that's true. And for those of you who think I'm being a partisan, the Republicans do it as well. And so what I worry is that we're going to go into this whipsaw period in American politics where throw out these bums, bring in those bums, throw out those bums, bring in these bums, and we get schizophrenic with our governance and the policy zigzags. And so my sense of it is why those numbers went that way is the weight of the evidence, which was sort of a drip, drip, drip of this is the government's getting bigger, the deficit's getting bigger, the economy's getting worse. Barack Obama was going to fix things. He had the magic wand. He never used it. I'm disappointed. Now, I think political scientists call this retrospective voting. They look at how am I doing in retrospect? Not so good. And so out goes the incumbent party.
Stephen, they're going to pass you a microphone. Hold on a second.
I don't need a microphone.
Andrew Lucker would appreciate it. Sorry. He's recording.
How long of a okay, there it is. How long of a period of polling do you really need to have in front of you for you to not really take it seriously, but to
Stephen, you can step right up there. I think there's a microphone right there.
Okay, how long of a period of polling do you need in front of you to take seriously? Only because, I mean, I know you have the margin of error, but recently in the generic Gallup polling, Republicans had a 10-point advantage one week, and it went down to dead even the next week. And I know there are hiccups like the Quinnipiac poll that had Kasich up plus 17. So you just generally have, I mean, sort of a smell test, something like that just doesn't seem right, or do you have a specific period where you say if we have this, this amount of people polled over this period of time, we can really invest in that?
Well, statistics is hard rock science, but people are not hard rock science. And so this is a mixture. We know that the statistics, if you count it up, the numbers work, but we also know people lie to the pollsters. I gave you the example of the McCain district that was 60% McCain, and so there's variables. What I look for big trends. None of these polls is of any interest to me, any one number. The trend is Kasich moving up, Strickland moving down. So in a campaign where I have the resources, I want a big benchmark poll early on, 1,000, 1,200 sample, lots of different questions, testing positive and negatives, name ID, favorability, unfavorable, that sort of thing. And then I want a brush fire about halfway through to see what's happened next. And then the last 3 weeks, we do what's called a rolling track, where by every 3 nights, we will have enough of a sample to get within 3.5 plus or minus margin of error. And then we watch that track every night. And in 2006, I got that track would be reported to me every night about 12:45 a.m., which is sadly I'm still up. And it was so bad for my party, I took to not reading them at night because I couldn't sleep. And so I would look at them first thing in the morning, because what I realized was if I look at them at 1 a.m. and go to bed, there's nothing I'm going to do between 1 a.m. and 7 a.m. that's going to change anything, except I won't sleep. And the next day I'll make stupider decisions than I would normally make. So instead I'd get up in the morning, look at them, get a jolt, and go to work trying to fix it. But nothing that I can do can affect the wave. Just like nothing Jerry can do affect the wave. So when the ocean is going one way, I can only hope that my guy's got a surfboard, knows how to surf, and is pointed in that direction.
keep in mind that people, think that a poll is about the horse race. That's only one part of the poll. I don't look at polls to find out if my candidate's ahead or behind. I'm looking at all the other questions I'm asking about issues. I'm looking at demographics, how do women think, how do working women think, age group and all that. But I'm an old timer. I've been around a long time. And I was around before we did, not before we did polls, but before we did polls in races I was involved in. So I used to do my own polling. And I cut my teeth up here. So my polling would be to go to a working class bar in Slavic Village, for those of you familiar with Slavic Village, and I'd sit next to two guys with big red noses who were drinking shots and beers. And that's the polling I did. And I did that in 1980 when Carter was running against Reagan, or Reagan was running against Carter. And I'm in, the place that Ohio has got to do well for the Democrat. And I go to this working class bar, and sitting next to these two guys, a TV spot comes on the air. Now, you may remember this spot. It was a spot with Carter. It was at the White House, and all the lights around the White House, except one light's on, and it's Carter there at the White House working late. And one guy turns to the other guy and said, if the son of a bitch didn't work so hard, we wouldn't be screwing up the country. And I thought, there's my poll, this is over. I work out every day at a rec center, and I'm a good Democrat, so, on the treadmill, I have my own TV, I'm watching MSNBC or ESPN. Those are my two stations. And I decided one day to look around at the 30 other folks that are running there and looking at their TV sets. They're all watching Fox News. So if you ever wonder how people come up with some crazy ideas like Obama's not a citizen or he's a Muslim or any other kind of stuff, you watch Fox News enough and you believe anything.
We got so far, Jerry, without arguing tonight.
Do I hear any other questions? Yes.
Don't worry about the microphone. I haven't heard much about the Tea Party or about Sarah Palin or about their effects. And of course, Democrats are hoping beyond hope that there's a split among Republicans. And there was talk about a national ad campaign, possibly to run, talking about Republicans have gone over the cliff because of the Tea Party, and that's why I want to keep Democrats. And I guess every local office runner is saying, stay in the White House, don't write your ads. What's your take on it?
Well, the Tea Party for the Republicans is not too much different than the Green Party for the Democrats. We each have our movements from the extremes of our parties, and we each have internal divisions about that. The Republicans over the years have fought over abortion and gay rights and what role that should play in our platform, and the Democrats over the last few years have fought over opposition to war in Iraq and where that should fall in the platform. And so I see that as opposite sides. The Tea Party movement itself, the actual people who attend the rallies is pretty small. But statewide poll in Ohio that I took in May of this year, question, do you agree with the goals set out by what's called the Tea Party movement? 38% of Ohioans said yes. It's a bigger number than most of you would have expected. Now, those aren't people going holding signs. Those are people watching and going, you know what, there's something going on there. And so Sarah Palin's a different thing than the Tea Party, in my view. Sarah Palin is a personality. She's an avatar for where you are in America. Because if I brought her in here and I walked her on campus, she'd be booed and spit upon all the way down to City Hall. But if we go out to Pierre, South Dakota, where I used to do governor's races, she would be hugged and kissed and greeted with warmth. Because there's a big split in America on things that Sarah Palin stands for. She's right at the cultural divide. I think she's unique unto herself for that reason. Democrats look at her and go, she's stupid. Republicans look at her, conservatives look at her and go, you know what? She speaks from the heart, she thinks what I think. So the Tea Party, I think, is a different thing. And I think like Ross Perot petered out, and the Green Party has largely petered out. I think that the Tea Party.
I agree, but this is about numbers, okay? So last week or the week before, I forget her name, McConnell, the lady who won in Delaware, Tea Party candidate, okay? Okay, she won. And everybody suspects that she's going to lose in the general election. Okay, the Democrats have that seat. It's a keeper. They don't pick up anything. So if she loses, okay, fine. Now you go to Colorado, where there's a Tea Party, Republican sort of Tea Party guy, but the incumbent is a Democrat. So the Tea Party guy, that's a twofer. When you take one away from the other party, it's one away from them and one for you. So you have to look at, where the Tea Party people, are going to lose, and they're going to lose, and they don't help anything or anybody. Now, the one place to look at, which is interesting, is New York, where this guy Palladino beat Rick Lazio. I believe that, I'm a former New Yorker, I think I still have the accent, I could have beat Rick Lazio. But this guy Palladino put in his own money. There's a tradition in New York State of very wealthy guys from the Buffalo area who spend a fortune to try to become governor. There's a guy named Golisano that did it a number of years ago. This guy wins the primary, okay? Now, if he beats Mario Cuomo, same thing. If he beats Cuomo, now you're talking. If he loses to Cuomo, well, Cuomo's going to win anyway. What's the big deal? And so what you got to look at is the numbers. Mark is pointing out, that in 1994, the Republicans with Reagan in midterm lost 52 seats in the House. 52. Now, we
84.
don't, 84, I'm sorry.
82.
Bush lost 52. 94
94 was a
52.
Republican sweep year.
Yeah. 94, I'm sorry, 2004.
2004, Bush won
2002,
re-election.
whatever. I'm getting the numbers wrong, but the point is that the Democrats are going to lose seats in the House. How many? Enough to lose the House? Probably. I'd say probably, but that's all that's important. Whether they lose by 1 seat or they lose by 20 seats, obviously it's better to lose, win by 20 seats, but that's what you look at. You're looking at numbers. Ted Strickland's running against John Kasich. John Kasich wins, let's say, but the Democrats keep the House in Ohio. John Kasich wins and the Democrats lose the House. Ted Strickland gets reelected and the Republicans win the House. I mean, that's what you got to be looking at. It's not just who wins and who loses. What does it mean in terms of the big picture? And the Tea Party, is interesting, because it gives, CNN and the other stations something to talk about, where they talk about the Tea Party a lot more than they talk about the Green Party and any other kind of party. But, it's interesting to see what's going to happen here. I mean, that's one of the few interesting things about this election. The rest of the stuff is not interesting at all. It's just a matter of how much.
Something Jerry just said, just let me jump in, I just remembered something I should have said during my initial remarks. There's this wave going on, Democrats wave in 06, Republican wave in 2010. There's one thing about this year that makes it a little different, is this year we will elect an apportionment board in Ohio, Secretary of State's office, the auditor's office, the governor's office. The party that controls that draws the lines. We've been living under lines for the last 20 years in Ohio drawn by Republican architects. If the Republicans win, Republican architects will draw the lines again, which has an impact far beyond just this cycle.
I think we might have time for one more question. Yes, go ahead.
I'll ask a quickie. I heard your statements, I didn't really like them, Jerry, about
He's a good guy.
what's going to happen nationally and statewide. Do you feel the same wave hitting with our county elections, the exec and the 11 districts?
Well, I think there's a possibility. Well, 11 districts are 11 separate districts that are basically pretty well defined of who's going to win as a Democrat and who's going to win as Republicans. I don't think there's, they get mostly Democratic seats and there'll be a couple of Republican seats. On the county executive race, the issue is what else is there that's coming in the next 30 days in terms of indictments, in terms of people being hauled off as we've experienced. Is it over? If it's over, I think that there's a good chance that the Democrat, Ed Fitzgerald, can survive. If it's not over, and anybody else is indicted or implicated here of a high level, I think there's a problem. And I think that you'll see the people in this county who decide this election are independents in the suburbs. They usually vote Democratic, it's Democratic county, but they can go Republican. And if they look at Matt Dolan and say, wait a second, this guy has nothing to do with everything else going on here, they could vote for him, and he could win.
Great place to leave it, because Jerry and I agree that Matt Dolan would be the best person to lead this county out of the corruption scandal that it's embarrassed by. And so, vote for Matt Dolan.
Good note. Too bad you don't vote here.
I don't. I vote down the south.
Well, this has been terrific. Let's show both of our panelists how much we appreciate it.